Each and every year, every draft class is loaded with tons of playmakers from top to bottom. Whether it's running backs, quarterbacks, receivers, or defensive players, there's always a long list of guys from college who want to make it work at the next level. No position epitomizes that more though than the wide receiver spot. Seemingly every year there are 40 to 50 guys who can make an NFL roster, and when it comes time to try to predict where these guys are going to go, it is unbelievably difficult. That is no different in 2024, as in today's video, I'm going to try to predict the top 12 wide receivers taken in this year's draft. Besides Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 1, it's pretty complicated between 2 and 12. As I said, today we're going to go through the top 12 receivers in this year's draft, give a case for each one of them, and hopefully not too many people's feelings are hurt. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football or the NFL draft, be sure to subscribe to the channel, as I will have 25 straight days of NFL draft prospect videos coming out in April, and you definitely won't want to miss out on that. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about this year's controversial receiver class. I also broke the 12 guys we're going to talk about today into 3 different tiers, and the first tier of guys we're going to talk about are ones who I think have potential to be a long-term receiver in the league, and have some upside to become a true wide receiver 1 at some point. The first one of those is the guy who comes in at number 12, Germaine Burton. Coming out of Calabasas, California, Germaine Burton was a big-time recruit and was one of the top players in the class of 2020. He would arrive at Georgia with immediate fanfare and became one of the top receiver targets in both 2020 and 2021 and helped them win a national championship. After that was over, he decided to transfer to Alabama, where he ended up being the best receiver on the team the past 2 years. While he did sort of have some off-the-field issues, Germaine Burton is loaded with potential, as things work out for him in the right places. He has speed, great ball skills, is extremely physical, and also got coached up by 2 of the best programs in the country. Germaine Burton screams to me a guy who's going under the radar, and someone that could absolutely blow up in the NFL, given the right circumstances. The next guy is a player who came out of absolute nowhere this season. Everyone was talking about Antoine Wells for South Carolina, but Xavier would become the best player on the team. Coming out of high school, he was a 4-star recruit in the class of 2019, and honestly didn't really get going until this past year. His best season was 2022, where he had 167 yards and 3 touchdowns, but this past year, Leggett had 71 catches for 1,255 yards and 7 scores. He's a guy that should absolutely be a household name for this year's draft, as he has insane measurables. He ran a low 4.340 and also has an incredible size-height combination that is not something we see all the time. Leggett, in my opinion, actually has a legit chance at being a wide receiver 1 at some point, and some are worried he could be a fluke because he's only been good for 1 season. We'll have to wait and see though. If you like a good underdog story, then you definitely like Ladarius Mackin. Coming out of North Murray High School in Chatsworth, Georgia, Mackin was the number 187 receiver and only a 3-star recruit in the class of 2020. Mackin was a Georgia boy through and through, and he epitomizes what Georgia football is all about. He ended up playing his first career snaps in 2021, catching 5 touchdowns, and then he became the best receiver on the team in 2022, finishing with 58 catches for 762 yards and 7 touchdowns. This past season, he was limited to just 30 catches for 478 yards and 2 touchdowns, but don't let that fool you. Mackin is definitely someone who has a lot of potential. He's considered a top 8 receiver on pretty much every big board, and his skill set definitely projects. He has great route running, ball tracking, and quickness off the line, is tough through and through, has good speed, and is really tough to get down. While Mackin probably won't be the most electric or insane receiver in the NFL, he screams a guy who's going to get a ton of catches and be extremely productive for a team. If you like both speed and player development, then Roman Wilson could be the wide receiver for you. Coming out of Honolulu, Roman Wilson was a late riser in the class of 2020, but eventually became a 4-star recruit and the number 38 receiver in the country. He decided to go over to Michigan, and with his elite speed, he was eventually going to make an impact on their team. He had a breakout season in 2021 with 400 yards and 3 scores, and then in 2022, he also had 4 more touchdowns. This past season, he became the featured receiver in Michigan's offense, finishing with 48 catches for 789 yards and 12 touchdowns. Roman was one of the best receivers in the Big Ten, and someone who should definitely translate to the NFL. He has incredible athletic traits, has incredible speed, doesn't drop the ball, is an effective route runner, and seemingly has all the tools to be a big-time NFL receiver. The only knock on his game is that he is a little bit smaller. The final guy I have in this first tier is Troy Franklin from Oregon. Shockingly, I think he should be a little bit higher on draft boards, but coming out of California, Troy Franklin was a 4-star recruit, a nearly top 50 player, and the number 3 receiver in the class of 2021. He had significant hype when he arrived at Oregon and wasted no time. He had 2 touchdowns as a freshman, and then would break out alongside Bo Nix in 2022. He had 61 catches for 891 yards and 9 scores, and then this past season, he became one of the best receivers in college football. He finished with 81 catches for 1,383 yards and 14 touchdowns. Franklin was an absolute force to be reckoned with, and his transition to the NFL should go pretty smooth. He's a guy who could be a downfield burner in the NFL, as his game is centered around his elite speed. He's also a great route runner, has terrific measurables, and now has the production and stats to back it up. I think Franklin is a good bet to actually hit on his hype in the NFL, and I'm excited to see what he can do. The first guy in our second tier is Xavier Worthy. Coming out of Central East High School in California, Worthy was a late rising recruit who eventually became a top 100 player. He decided to go to Michigan, but after some academic mix-ups, he was not able to qualify and would decide to flip to Texas. Worthy immediately became one of the best players on Texas's team in 2021, especially in that Red River game, and over the past 3 years has dominated for him. While he did battle a little bit of injury during his time there, this past season he finished with 75 catches for over 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was alongside both Ja'Tavion Sanders and Adon Mitchell, and Texas would get all the way to the college football playoff. In my opinion, Worthy would have been in that tier 3, but then he tied for the fastest 40 time in combine history. That always seems to happen each and every year, where a player builds his stock based on that event. Worthy has ridiculous speed, has had great production, is a good route runner, has been very consistent, and has good hands. Honestly, I still think he is going under the radar a bit, but I would not be surprised to see him taken in the 20s of the first round. At number 6, the next guy we need to talk about is Adon Mitchell, sometimes referred to as Adon Mitchell. Coming out of high school, he honestly wasn't all that big of a deal. He was only a 3-star recruit from the state of Tennessee and ended up signing with Georgia. To be honest, Mitchell actually struggled to get going, as while he was productive in 2021, he was limited in 2022, and he decided to head to Texas for a change in scenery. In his 1 year with the Longhorns, he ended up finishing with 55 catches for 845 yards and 11 touchdowns. I still struggle to see why some think he's a top 5 receiver, but I have to take scouts' words for it. He's seen as a guy who has the perfect combination of size, athleticism, and technical skills, and combining that with his really good production this past year, I guess many scouts believe his best football is still yet to be played on Sundays. Head number 1 of LSU's two-headed monster at receiver was Brian Thomas Jr. Coming out of high school, Thomas was always a big deal, as he was both a football and basketball superstar, as according to 24/7 Sports, he was a top 70 recruit, the number 9 receiver, and a 4-star player in the class of 2021. He immediately made an impact with LSU in 2021, as he finished with 28 catches for 2 touchdowns, and then would follow that up with 5 touchdowns in 2022. With Ja'Ray Jenkins gone, Brian Thomas would step into his role, catching 68 passes for 1,177 yards and 17 touchdowns. Thomas was a touchdown machine, and right now is seen as a guy who could go in the top 15. He has an impressive combination of size, speed, and burst, is a decent vertical threat, has great acceleration, and is a tremendous route runner. The one thing that some are concerned about is the fact he was receiver number 2 to Malik Neighbors, so they were focusing more on him, but I'm not really too worried about that, and it worked out for Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, so I think Brian Thomas Jr. will be a star at the next level. Besides Marvin Harrison Jr., let's get him out of the way. If I was an NFL GM and there was no consequences for the guy I picked, I would go at Keon Coleman just because of his ridiculous upside. Coleman was a huge deal, as he grew up in Louisiana and ended up becoming a 4-star recruit and the number 42 receiver in the class of 2021. He originally signed with Michigan State, where he caught 1 touchdown as a freshman and then would have nearly 800 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2022 with the Spartans. When Coleman entered the portal, pretty much every school in the nation wanted him, and it was honestly for good reason. This past year at Florida State, Coleman caught 50 catches for 658 yards and 11 total touchdowns. He had some of the most incredible plays and catches of the 2023 season, and he literally looks like he is not human. He's the kind of player who, in my opinion, looks like he's made in a lab, and he has elite size, an elite frame, incredible hands, incredible burst, a great vertical, and also has tremendous production. Some do have concerns about his work ethic or his route running, but honestly, I am not worried about that. I think Coleman is an unbelievably insane athlete, and this is probably my most controversial take of the video, but he has a chance to break the NFL if he pans out. We now get into the final tier in this year's receiver class, and these are guys who I think are guaranteed to hit and guaranteed to be wide receiver 1s at some point. The first guy is Rome Odunze. Coming out of Bishop Gorman High School, he played alongside Dorian Thompson-Robinson for a couple of seasons and eventually decided to go to Washington. He was a 4-star recruit and a top 150 player in the class of 2020 and ended up hitting immediately at Washington. He had 4 touchdowns his redshirt freshman year in 2021, and then in 2022, he would break out alongside Penix. He had 75 catches for 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns, and then this past season, he became a dark horse Heisman contender, a finalist for the Blitnikoff Award, and one of the best players in the country. he finished with 92 catches for 1,600 yards and 13 touchdowns. Adunze is pretty much terrific in every single aspect of his game. He is an incredible athlete, is an incredible route runner, is an incredible worker, has insane production, has elite level speed, has good height, and pretty much everything about him should translate to the next level. He's by no means a burner, but he is pretty much everything an NFL team wants. I think Adonze will be a star, and I cannot wait to watch him next year. To be honest, this past offseason when Malik Neighbors was named a preseason All-SEC first-team player, I kind of rolled my eyes. I thought he was good at LSU in 2022, but I didn't think he could be one of the best receivers in the country. He completely proved me wrong this year, and he's going to be an unbelievably valuable player in the NFL. He is the second part of that two-headed monster with Brian Thomas Jr., and this was always seen. After originally committing to Mississippi State, Neighbors would flip to LSU and was a top 150 player, a top 20 receiver, and a 4-star recruit in the class of 2021. He would have an immediate impact at LSU, catching 28 passes for 4 touchdowns his freshman year, and then would break out into an 1,000-yard receiver in 2022. This past season, Neighbors had his best year yet, as alongside Heisman-winning quarterback Jaden Daniels, he finished with 89 catches for nearly 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns. Neighbors is once again one of those guys that pretty much checks each and every box. Route running, athleticism, height, hands, production, you name it. Everything is going his way, but there are some concerns about his motor. That is pretty much the only knock I've seen on his game, but I'm not overly concerned about that, and I think Neighbors could be the next big thing in the NFL. Last but not least, we get to the generational wide receiver prospect of this year's class, Marvin Harrison Jr. Pretty much everybody knows his story by now, as he is the son of the former legendary Colts receiver, played alongside Kyle McCord at St. Joseph's Prep in Philadelphia, and was underrated coming out of high school. He was a 4-star recruit, but somehow 20 receivers were ranked ahead of him. Harrison immediately showed out in the spring of 2021, and as a freshman caught 3 touchdowns. In 2022, Harrison would have his breakout season, finishing with 77 catches for 1,200 yards and 14 scores. In this past season, while being pretty much covered by every player, every scheme, and everything and anything to stop him, he still finished with 67 catches for 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. Harrison is seen as the best receiver prospect in quite some time, and honestly I don't even have to go through a scouting report. There is nothing this man cannot do, but honestly my only worry is that the expectation is going to be too high for him. I'm sure his dad will help him out there, but my oh my, he is getting so much hype it is unbelievable. He has the talent to hit it, but we'll just have to wait and see. So yeah, in today's video I walked you through who in my opinion are the top 12 receiver prospects in this year's draft. We went through who they were, how they've gotten to this point, and what they could bring to the NFL. But what do you guys think? Who is your favorite receiver for this year's draft? Who in your opinion is the most underrated? And also, should I do a part 2 talking about receivers who could go in the middle to late rounds who could also be steals? I would definitely enjoy doing that video, but be sure to drop a player I could cover or include in that one. Before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.